Today, we are going to be talking about two poems from Clint Smith's anthology, Counting Descent. We will be analyzing Ode to the Loop-de-Loop and Ode to Drizzy Drake Hands. Students will begin class with a nice little intro activity to get them collaborating with their groups. Then, they will complete a guided TP cast of Ode to the Loop-de-Loop. After working with one of the odes as a class, students will have the chance to work together in their groups to demonstrate their independent skills of TP casting with Ode to Drizzy Drake Hands. After analyzing both poems, students will play a booklet in order to help them compare and contrast the odes they read and prepare them for the AP-style multiple-choice quiz they will take after. Finally, students will return to the intro activity as a fun way to end class. To start off class, each group should have a blank piece of computer paper and colored utensils. In their groups, students will have 3 to 5 minutes to work together and design the most thrilling and creative roller coaster they can think of. The roller coasters will then be hung up and displayed on the back whiteboard of the classroom. Now that we're all pumped up, it's time to begin our first TB cast for Ode to the Loop-de-Loop. When first looking at the title of this poem, there were a few thoughts that immediately pop out. First of all, this poem is titled Ode to the Loop-de-Loop, so it is expected that the speaker will be praising loop-de-loops in some way. But what kind of loop-de-loops are we talking about? The two most obvious examples will be the swirly doodle that people often draw on their papers, or a loop-de-loop that can be found on a roller coaster. Now we can begin to read through the poem and paraphrase as we go along. We've always had a strange relationship, you and I. You're a peculiar sort of sight, how you look like the distorted spine of an apatosaurus, a brilliant contortion of steel and physics. I'm not gonna lie, though, you scare the out of me. Looking at the first stanza, it is clear that the speaker has a pre-existing relationship with the subject of the poem, but that relationship is somewhat strained. The speaker says that the subject looks strange, like if you bent the spine of a giant dinosaur backwards. The phrase steel and physics makes it clear to the reader that the speaker is addressing the loop-de-loop of a roller coaster, but the following lines reveal that the speaker is actually scared of them. Let's continue to read and paraphrase the poem. How you manufacture inertia and sell it to the highest bidder. How you simultaneously exist as a masquerade of false gravity and a centrifuge of boundless euphoria. This was all more manageable when you came in the form of my Hot Wheels playset, somewhere I can preside. The speaker is scared of loop-de-loops because of the confusing mechanics behind them, such as the way they create inertia and the convoluted way that gravity affects them. The speaker also acknowledges that despite these mysterious workings, the fast spin of loop-de-loops, similar to a scientific centrifuge, can bring immense joy. He says that his understanding of loop-de-loops was a lot easier to handle when it was smaller and in a childlike form, referencing his Hot Wheels playset. The speaker had a sense of control when everything was miniaturized. Somewhere I can preside over your twists and turns, govern the kinetic energy between my hands. But I see how you create a certain sort of ecstasy. It's why people run to see the photograph of their faces after. The speaker previously had the ability to control these forces of nature, which made him feel comfortable. Then, the speaker concedes that he understands why some people are so excited by roller coasters. It's why people run to see the photograph of their faces after getting off the ride, to be reminded that this sort of exhilaration is possible. Tell me, at what velocity does joy travel? Does it need a harness? Or merely the right degree of force to disentangle the fear from the rapture? The speaker asking, at what velocity does joy travel, is really him asking how fast does a loop have to be in order for it to be enjoyable. He asks if we actually need to be secured to our seats, or will the force of physics alone be enough to keep us alive and remove the feeling of fear from the weightless feeling you get while riding a loop. Now that we have divulged what the poem is actually saying, we can analyze its literary devices in order to figure out its deeper meaning. The main literary devices that appear throughout Ode to the Loop-de-Loop are the ode format, personification, imagery, and an illusion. The most obvious literary component to this poem is that it is an ode. Odes are an incredibly old form of poetry that dates back to ancient Greece, but they have multiple components that are uniform across all their forms, such as praising their subjects and having the speaker address their subjects directly. However, in the case of Ode to the Loop-de-Loop, the element of praise is a bit convoluted. For the entire first half of the poem, the speaker is describing why they don't like loop-de-loops. It is not until the second half of the poem that the praising aspect is introduced, as the speaker concedes that they understand why other people enjoy loop-de-loops, and shows not quite reverence for loop-de-loops, but a good level of respect. Traditionally, Greek odes have 3 parts: the strophe, the antistrophe, and the epode. While not all modern odes follow this format, they still echo its style. In the case of Ode to the Loop-de-Loop, the first 7 stanzas would be considered the strophe, as this is when the speaker's initial feelings regarding loop-de-loops are introduced. The next 2 stanzas would be the antistrophe, because it is still talking about the feelings regarding loop-de-loops, but offers an alternate perspective. Finally, the epode will be the last stanza, where the poem turns into a more existential question. The second literary device we're going to cover is personification. Obviously, a roller coaster is an inanimate object and cannot display any emotion or personality traits. But because of the first-person dialogue format of the ode, the loop-de-loop takes on human characteristics. The speaker speaks directly to the loop-de-loop, addressing them as a person, and throughout the 4th and 5th stanza, even characterizes them as a seemingly deceitful figure, using words and phrases such as masquerade of false gravity, and saying that they sell inertia to the highest bidder, referring to those who pay for roller coaster rides. Next is imagery. There are 2 main scenes that the speaker creates for the audience using imagery to tap into some memories they may have. The first is the concept of playing with Hot Wheels as a child. Hot Wheels are a toy car company that also makes fun tracks for the cars to race around on. Specifically, in the poem, the speaker is referencing a Hot Wheels track that contains a loop-de-loop, using tactile imagery to describe how it feels to guide the small cars along the track and to have control over their motions. The second image that the speaker creates is the feeling of getting off a roller coaster and going to find your ride photo. Large roller coasters often have cameras positioned at their major drops in order to capture the candid reactions of the people riding them. When someone gets off a roller coaster, they can see their photos and be reminded of the large drop or quick start and can laugh at their excited or shocked faces, reminding them of the exhilarating experience they just went through. The last literary device we're going to cover is illusion. In the last few lines of the poem, the speaker asks, "Tell me, at what velocity does joy travel? Does it need a harness, or merely the right degree of force to disentangle the fear from the rapture?" This line is a biblical allusion, referring to the event where, at the second coming of Jesus, all believing souls will rise to heaven. The speaker is relating the feeling of one's soul being sucked into heaven to the weightless feeling of flying that you feel while at the top of a loop on a roller coaster. The illusion of the rapture also relates to the speaker's emotional feelings regarding roller coasters. The event of being pulled off of this plane to existence seems to be a scary event, but when you think about the reward it brings, that fear is removed. Similarly, going upside down on a roller coaster seems scary as well, but when you think about how you were hypothetically safe within the ride restraints, that fear is replaced by joy. Next, we're going to discuss some of the main attitudes and emotions present throughout the poem, the first being apprehension. Throughout the poem, the speaker isn't quite against the loop-de-loop, but feels incredibly apprehensive about it. He describes the relationship as strange, and spends the majority of the poem describing why, while he does think loop-de-loops are interesting, he's also incredibly scared of them. The next main emotion felt throughout the poem is of reminiscing nostalgia. Although reminiscence isn't really an emotion that the speaker feels throughout the text, it is one that is invoked within the reader. Referencing a famous childhood toy like Hot Wheels causes the audience to reflect on their own memories of similar experiences and further put themselves in the speaker's shoes. At the shift of the poem in line 21, the speaker's tone switches from being mainly negative to containing hints of understanding. The speaker concedes that while he isn't too fond of loop-de-loops, he understands why other people are, going over in detail the image of someone seeing their ride photo after a roller coaster in order to remember the exhilarating thrills they'd just been through. The final, and perhaps most subtle attitude presented throughout the poem is vulnerability. One of the speaker's main grievances with the loop-de-loop is that he thinks it's too large and complicated to understand. He longs for a time when he could govern the unstoppable workings of gravity and kinetic energy and had complete control over a concept which now seems too vast to comprehend. In addition, the speaker questions at the end of the poem if he will ever be able to separate his fear from the enjoyment of this uncontrollable experience. Much like how he wouldn't be able to control his body ascending to heaven during the rapture, he feels powerless in the thought that he has no control over the forces acting upon him via a loop-de-loop. The shift in Ode to the Loop-de-Loop happens around lines 20 to 21. Prior to the shift, the speaker focuses only on the negatives of loop-de-loops, characterizing them as deceitful beings whose mechanics are too complicated for him to enjoy. In addition, the speaker's main feelings of lack of control are displayed through his memory of playing with Hot Wheels as a child. He relates his helplessness to a time where he felt he did have an understanding of loop-de-loops, comparing it to his emotions now. After the shift, the speaker's attitude towards loop-de-loops changes. He accepts that they do hold a certain appeal to those seeking thrills and who enjoy the feeling of physics having the upper hand. Even though the speaker is now describing the loop-de-loops in a more positive light, he still emphasizes their danger. He once again reiterates the powerlessness he feels with loop-de-loops, this time using the illusion of the rapture to capture his lack of control, helping to tie together the poem's more existential ending. Looking back at the title, it is clear that the speaker is referring to the loops found in a roller coaster. Surprisingly, the title of this poem is deceiving, as while it is named to be an ode, very little direct praise is given. Instead, the speaker shows more of a respect for the natural power of loop-de-loops, even if they make him uncomfortable. With all this in mind, there are two main themes that come out of this poem. The first is fearing a lack of control in situations where control is impossible. Throughout the entirety of the poem, the speaker shows disdain for loop-de-loops based solely on the idea that he doesn't understand them and dislikes how powerless he feels while writing them. This concept relates to the larger idea that the speaker likely feels uncomfortable in situations where their problems may seem bigger and out of his control. The next theme that comes out of this poem is that even though you may not like having your sense of control being overridden by some unstoppable force, you have to respect those forces anyways. This is where the ode element of the poem comes in, as even though the speaker is distressed by his feeling of helplessness, he understands that it is something he can't change and just has to respect the way the world works. So now that we've gone through the TP cast of an ode as a class, it's time for you to try it by yourself. In your groups, complete a basic TP cast of Ode to Drizzy Dracans, taking note of any major differences in composition between the two poems. Now that we've analyzed two odes, it's time to see the difference between them. This booklet would have questions like which of the odes uses this literary device or which poem has this specific tone. Now that you have a better grasp of these two poems, it's time to test how deep your understanding really is. You will have 7 minutes to complete this 10-question AP-style quiz that has questions over both Ode to the Loop-de-Loop as well as Ode to Drizzy Dracans. All the questions will be multiple choice and will mimic the 5 question groups that can be found on the AP exam. Now that we're at the end of our lesson, it's time to vote on which group roller coaster was best. Each group would get 1 vote and would not be able to vote for their own roller coaster. The winning table will get candy.